I stood face to face with my husband, the man who had once thrown me out of the house after blindly believing his stepchild's lies. He stood there with an air of superiority, looking down on me as though he knew everything and I knew nothing. But instead of breaking down, I found myself laughing. Reflect? No, not at all, I said calmly, pulling a thick stack of papers from my bag. Now, please sign here. I handed him the divorce papers and the legal documents my lawyer had prepared. At first, he signed them without protest, keeping his face composed and cold. But when his eyes fell on the attached documents, his expression froze, his hand trembled ever so slightly. Beside him, Jim, his son, began to panic. The lies they had both woven so carefully were unraveling in front of them, and the truth now stood bare. My name is Mary. I am a 52-year-old office worker. I had remarried a year ago to Brian. After our marriage, I moved into his house, which he shared with his adult son, Jim. Jim had a full-time job but refused to leave the home he grew up in. I never adopted him, never even saw him as a child of mine. To me, he was simply a stranger living under the same roof. From the very beginning, I had hoped he would move out so that Brian and I could live as husband and wife in peace. But Jim had no such intentions. This is my mother's house, he said firmly. She died 5 years ago, and I will not leave the home I shared with her. I sympathized with him because I had also lost my first husband around the same time his mother passed away. I knew the ache of grief, but sympathy didn't make his defiance any easier to live with. His contempt toward me was evident in everything he did. One evening, after I had spent hours cooking dinner, Jim muttered under his breath, "My mom was a better cook, but I guess I'll eat this." He picked at the meal with disdain, not caring how much his words stung. His contempt wasn't hidden. It weighed heavily on me every single day. I turned to Brian, hoping for comfort, guidance, or at least some support. Jim clearly doesn't like my cooking, I said, my frustration leaking into my voice. What should I do? Brian shrugged indifferently. Then stop cooking for him. He doesn't have to eat it. His lack of concern stung, but I took his advice. The next time Jim came home to no dinner waiting for him, he exploded in rage. Why isn't there food for me? You married my dad, so it's your job to cook for me too. His audacity left me speechless. No matter what I did, I couldn't win. Jim's comments grew nastier as time passed, and Brian's refusal to intervene left me feeling utterly alone. Before our marriage, Brian had promised me that Jim would move out soon. Yet here we were, still living with him, as if nothing had changed. He just can't afford it, Brian would claim. But I knew better. Jim had inherited a substantial estate from his late mother. He squandered most of it on luxury items, expensive watches, electronics, gadgets. I had even seen the letters from credit card companies piling up in his room. He wasn't just reckless with money, he was reckless with his life. And through it all, Brian enabled him. One day, my daughter Emma came to me with joyful news. "Mom, I got proposed to." Her eyes sparkled with excitement, and my heart softened. Since my remarriage, joy had become rare in my life. This was one of those pure, beautiful moments I could cherish. "Congratulations," I exclaimed warmly. "I'm sure your father in heaven is smiling, too." Memories of my late husband filled my mind, his last days, his concerns for Emma's future. He would have been so relieved to see her find happiness. "I'll introduce my fiancé soon," Emma added, then hesitated. "But do I really have to introduce him to Brian? He's just your second husband. He has nothing to do with me." Her honesty cut me, but I couldn't blame her. Unlike Jim, she had never been adopted by Brian, never shared a bond with him. "Just greet him briefly," I suggested gently. "It doesn't have to be more than that." When I told Brian about Emma's engagement, he barely reacted. His indifference hurt, but didn't surprise me. He had never shown any real interest in Emma. Later, Jim sneered at me. "Why don't you just divorce Dad and live with your daughter? You probably hate living with us anyway." Shocked, I turned to Brian for support, but as usual, he walked away without a word. My anger boiled over. "Don't you have someone special in your life, Jim? Why don't you get married and give your father some peace? Jim scowled and walked away. I doubted he had anyone in his life. The thought of him marrying and bringing a wife into the house filled me with dread. Do you think Jim will stay here, even after marriage? I asked Brian one evening. He didn't even glance at me. Leave it to Jim. I don't care either way. His indifference infuriated me. Eventually, Emma introduced me to her fiancé. Brian refused to come. I don't care about that. Don't invite me to the wedding either, he said coldly. My heart ached, but when I met Emma's fiancé, Jack, I found myself relieved. He was mature, kind, and responsible, everything Jim was not. He was around Jim's age, but carried himself with far more grace and dignity. You've found yourself a great man, I told Emma, sincerely relieved. Compared to him, Jim looked even more pathetic. If things don't work out with your husband and his son, you can always come live with us, Jack offered kindly. His words gave me a sense of relief I hadn't felt in years. But back at home, Jim greeted me with the same contempt as always. A housekeeper shouldn't be late. Dad and I are starving. Hearing him call me a housekeeper stung deeply, but Brian pretended not to notice. Compared to Jack, both Brian and Jim seemed utterly useless. Meanwhile, Brian began disappearing every weekend. I'm helping a friend whose mother is in the hospital, he explained. I didn't believe him. When I asked, is this friend a woman? He panicked and denied it too quickly. His behavior only deepened my doubts. Jim noticed the tension and took pleasure in it. Dad probably regrets marrying an old lady like you. Maybe he wishes he'd married someone younger. You're going to get cheated on and kicked out. Poor thing. His words stung because deep down, I feared they might be true. Why don't you just give up on Dad and leave before things get messy? Jim added smugly. That was the moment I realized I couldn't tolerate this life any longer. I often wondered if Brian intended to replace me with his mistress. Just as these thoughts consumed me, Emma called. Mom, I need to talk to you. Can you come over? She asked, her voice serious. Worried, I hurried to her place. Jack was there, too. What's the matter? Don't tell me you're calling off the wedding, I said anxiously. They both smiled awkwardly. Why would we cancel the wedding? This is about you, not us, Emma explained. Relieved, I was caught off guard by their next revelation. Jack handed me his phone. Is this your husband, Brian? At first, I didn't recognize him. But then I noticed the young woman next to him calling him by name. After looking closely, I realized it was indeed Brian, wearing clothes I had seen him wear before. The photo was taken at a wedding venue, and the two of them were discussing their own wedding plans. I was speechless. Brian had no children other than Jim, so the young woman couldn't possibly be his daughter. The unthinkable truth hit me. He was planning to marry someone else while still married to me. Emma frowned. That woman looks far too young to be Jim's girlfriend, doesn't she? I admitted I had suspected Brian might be cheating, but I never imagined it would be with someone so young. Emma and Jack were shocked when I told them everything, his evasive behavior, his weekend absences, my growing doubts. Your husband is awful. We need to properly investigate and make sure he takes responsibility, Jack said firmly. You need to divorce him immediately, Emma added. I agreed, but I knew we needed solid evidence first. Jack began searching for private investigators. Don't worry about your future, Mom. You can come live with us, Jack reassured me. His words gave me the strength to return home with newfound determination. Jim greeted me the way he always did. Hurry up and make dinner. Housekeepers shouldn't be out so late, he said dismissively. His words cut deep, but I prepared dinner silently. I wouldn't let him see me struggle. Once I had proof of Brian's affair, I would leave. If Brian remarried, Jem would have to rely on his new stepmother, and I knew he wouldn't dare treat her the way he treated me. When Brian came home, I decided to test him. Will you be attending our daughter's wedding? They're having it at a prestigious venue, I said casually, mentioning the same venue from the photo. His face stiffened for a moment before he denied knowing the place. That reaction confirmed my suspicions, but I didn't press further. Then Brian changed the subject. Jim hasn't asked you for money, has he? He's been struggling financially. I shook my head. Jim had never asked me for money. He only saw me as a housekeeper. He's been pestering me, Brian continued, despite inheriting a large sum from his mother. He blew it all, and now he's asking me for help. I thought of the debt collection notices I had seen while cleaning Jim's room, but stayed quiet. I didn't want to reveal what I knew. Not when Brian was likely cheating, not when Jim would explode if he realized I'd been through his belongings. Housekeeper or not, I haven't heard anything about that, I replied instead. Brian sighed. Can't you talk to him? Tell him to stop wasting money. I was stunned. Jim doesn't listen to me. You're his father. You should talk to him. But Brian kept pushing. Don't be so cold, please. I'm not good at dealing with tough conversations. His insistence only deepened my disappointment. The next day, he pressed again. Have you talked to Jim about the money yet? What did he say? When I told him I hadn't, Brian grew angry. What are you doing? You need to talk to him right away. Fed up with his nagging, I decided to focus entirely on gathering evidence of his affair. Reluctantly, I approached Jim. Your father is worried about your spending. He asked me to remind you to be more careful with money. I tried to sound neutral, but Jim exploded. Who do you think you are, housekeeper? It's my money, and I'll spend it however I want. None of your business. His rage showed me exactly why Brian avoided these conversations. Still, I couldn't help but wish Brian, as his father, would take responsibility. Instead, he ignored his son's flaws while chasing after his mistress. Jim glared at me with hatred. I'll get you kicked out of this house. Just wait. His words stung, but I reminded myself, once I had proof of Brian's infidelity, I would leave on my own terms. A few days later, Emma called. Mom, we have the proof. Can you meet us at a restaurant? My heart sank. Was it true? Did he really cheat on me? Emma's voice was firm. Yes. He's been seeing a woman much younger than you. They're even looking for a new house together. Jack handed me the investigation report filled with undeniable photos of Brian and his mistress. You need to divorce him right away, Jack advised. This woman is suspicious. She spends extravagantly and might even be seeing other men besides your husband. She could be planning to take his money and leave him. Hearing this, I realized how deeply Brian had fallen into her schemes. They had even visited a wedding venue. She might already have taken money for preparations. I knew I had to act quickly. When I returned home, Brian and Jim were in the living room. Mary, come here. We need to talk, Brian said sternly. Jim smirked. You've been seeing a younger guy, haven't you? Dad saw you at a restaurant with him. He showed a blurry photo of me with Jack. Caught red-handed. How embarrassing, dating someone the same age as your daughter. That's Emma's fiancé, and she was with us, I said calmly. But Brian wouldn't listen. Jim caught you in the act. You've been cheating on me, haven't you? Leave this house. We'll divorce later. I almost laughed at his arrogance. All right, I said simply. I'll leave. We'll discuss divorce and finances later. As I walked to the door, Jim shouted, Make us dinner before you go. I'm hungry. Even in that moment, all he cared about was food. I ignored him and left, heading straight to Emma's house with the investigation report. 3 weeks later, Brian finally contacted me. Let's meet and discuss things at the house. Bring the divorce papers, he said. On the day of the meeting, I arrived with Emma, Jack, and our lawyer. Brian's face paled when he saw us. Why didn't you come alone? He stammered. You never said I had to, I replied. The house was already filthy after just 3 weeks without me. Even with all these people, you'll still pay alimony, Brian sneered. I laughed. I've done nothing wrong. Sign these. I handed him the divorce papers. Brian froze. Why am I paying alimony? You're the one who cheated, he protested, showing the blurry photo again. Our lawyer calmly handed him the investigator's report. We have proof of your affair. Brian's face turned ashen. Jim was speechless. I can't pay alimony. I'm broke. I borrowed money for the wedding and honeymoon, Brian admitted. Jim's true motive slipped out. You're not really remarrying, are you? I don't want to lose half of your inheritance. But Brian shook his head. I already spent all of Mom's inheritance. Jim collapsed in disbelief. Dad, can't you lend me some money? You've got something left, right? I'm broke, Brian whispered. I reminded them both. Jim, I found debt notices in your room. At your age, asking your mother to clean your room is embarrassing. Our lawyer presented the alimony documents, and Brian reluctantly signed them. Jack added, I heard your mistress is spending your money and seeing other men. Brian turned white, frantically trying to call her, but she didn't answer. Mary, I'm sorry. Don't leave us, Jim begged. Dad's never home, and I'm tired of eating junk food. I shook my head. Ask your father's new wife. You'll have a young housekeeper soon enough. And with that, I walked out for the last time. We went straight to City Hall and filed for divorce. I moved in with Emma and Jack. Life was a bit cramped, but we planned to move to a larger home soon. A few weeks later, I heard Brian's mistress had scammed him, running off with a large sum of money for a wedding that would never happen. He was left with nothing but debt. Jim even called me, begging for help. Mom, Dad moved out, and I have nowhere to go. I'm not your mother, I reminded him coldly. We're not related, and I've divorced your father. When he kept harassing me, Jack threatened to report him to the police. That finally scared him off. Life with Emma and Jack was peaceful. Soon, we received wonderful news. Emma was pregnant. I was thrilled to become a grandmother. For the first time in years, life was finally looking up, and I was determined to cherish every single moment with my loved ones.